Good afternoon. And to finish off this day, so we're going to stand in between you and the cocktail reception with myself, and I'm a principal analyst at ABI Research, Aapo Markkanen. I focus especially on the intersection of IoT and big data. So I kind of try to figure out these new business models and processes that this convergence of analytics and the Internet of Things is enabling. Okay, and on this panel I have this league of extraordinary gentlemen. So there's David from Iridium, Hans from TeliaSonera. Is he here?
Hans Dahlberg is enough.
I don't think so. Steve from Wireless. Okay. Charlie from Telit. And Miguel from Ericsson.
That's right.
Okay, and the theme of this panel is to export M2M forecasts. So we're gonna kind of sum up this growth trends and what is gonna hide in behind these numbers. For example, at ABI, we estimate that the growth in both cellular and M2M connections and modules was, let's say, below 20% last year, and we don't really expect that to pick up too dramatically over the next 2 to 3 years. I've gonna see some kind of pockets of growth, like for example, e-call is a big factor in Europe, and there's smart metering in China, and also usage-based insurance, OEM telematics, seemingly becoming a really big business in North America. So to start off, I think we should have some kind of roundup of these growth drivers or obstacles. Like, what other areas do you expect to drive this growth? And on the other hand, which factors can you identify as the main obstacles of growth? Maybe go from right to left?
Sure. So again, my name is Charlie McNiff. I'm responsible for business development for our machine-to-machine platform called DeviceWise. We operate it in a multi-tenant hosted infrastructure under the Telit M2M Air brand, and we sell it globally to MNOs under our DeviceWise brand. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Telit. So we're seeing a lot of traction in the market right now is in vertical markets like a lot of regulation in Europe, telematics on a global basis, industrial and manufacturing, and then retail are the 4 key areas. And with the regulation in Europe, we're seeing things like the DEC and SMIP activities in the UK. Smart meters in every home, driving big demand for connectivity happening over the next few years here. And then e-call for the EU countries across all of Europe is going to drive a lot of connectivity quickly over the next few years. In the telematics sector, there's a lot of growth coming from that sector, whether it's commercial or aftermarket or consumer, from things like AVL or fleet telematics or usage-based insurance. And we're seeing that market grow from about 34% to approximately 43 or 44% over the next 5 years. And so that's accelerating, which means we're seeing real growth right now in the next few years. And I think there's going to be a total of about 180 million modules shipped globally in 2019 from about, 100 and something today. So very high volumes, very high growth we're seeing there. Also in the industrial and manufacturing sector, a lot of growth there. Things like oil and gas, for pipeline metering or flow metering in water utilities, but especially manufacturing. So a lot of folks in manufacturing are going to put gateways out there. And I think Cisco said it best, manufacturing is probably the biggest play for growth here for us. And we're seeing, we came from IBM's industrial automation group, so we agree with the manufacturing play. It's huge. We're in most of the auto OEMs. We're in companies like Caterpillar on their plant floor, monitoring their plant floor manufacturing lines. We're also working with big OEMs like Emerson, Mitsubishi Electric Automation, Siemens Automation that embed our software, and we're seeing real demand from them in the industrial sector where there's very high ARPU for solutions, and there's pent-up demand coming from this industrial and manufacturing sector. So capital budgets and OpEx budgets are being released now. So we're seeing a lot of growth there. Put a smart gateway on a machine and connect it up through the cloud and show something on a dashboard or feed it back into SAP for some sort of a predictive maintenance or asset optimization application. And in the retail space, there's a lot of demand for things like coolers, beer coolers, soda coolers, ice cream freezers, vending machines. We actually put a solution together with SAP to monitor these things for inventory management, which is the #1 use case, and then process, predictive maintenance as well as the second big use case.
Okay, maybe just advancing towards the other end of the table.
So Steve Priestley, and I guess what Charlie said in summary, but I guess looking at this from our perspective, it's good to see that the module manufacturers are really seeing explosive growth across a multitude of industries, because that's telling us that M2M and IoT is becoming much more pervasive, much more mainstream, and is actually moving from a niche type market to a more global market. And I think, what we have got to recognize is that in our space, we're facing globalization, which is challenging within the operators, because clearly as you move through the different applications, low bandwidth is relatively easy to do, high bandwidth is still a challenge. Going off-net high bandwidth is still a challenge. And actually, when this market does explode into those different areas, the growth and some of the challenges you face actually start to become different, because low power radio will change ARPUs and therefore change business mixes, and growth in connections may not necessarily be seen as growth in dollars. So for me, I think there's a few challenges that we have to solve as an industry, making global products truly global and consistent, taking some of the complexity out of M2M as a technology such that users can adopt it better is really, really important, and having things that are perhaps turned on their head from a business model perspective, driven by how a consumer of the data might view that data, will enable us to develop business models of the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to Miguel and so was it David? Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball there. Like, if you think these connections and modules, are they actually even meaningful or relevant benchmarks anymore? Since I think there's evidence that organizations that are really being the early movers in IoT, they're becoming quite smart about how they deploy these systems. So I think there's also what's happening is they're optimizing and minimizing their connectivity footprints. So you may have like an increasing bunch of sensors communicating to, let's say, one gateway. So I think the sensor per gateway ratio is increasing. And that is I mean, there's a lot of actual growth of value being created, but it's kind of flying under the radar if we only focus on the connections and modules. So to you, gentlemen, what do you think? Could it be that we are simply witnessing a bit of a value shift in the industry from this kind of telco-centric M2M towards more multipolar IoT?
I'll give it a try. I mean, I understand the question as is there a particular value shift happening in the industry right now, right? And I think it's still early days. There's still a lot of machine-to-machine challenges to, like you were talking about, handling the high bandwidth challenges. There's solutions to that. We can handle the solution, and they go together, the solutions, because if you can start putting quality of service or service classes, you can actually start layering your offerings, and you can actually, by resolving the high bandwidth issues, you can also start putting different types of classes, meaning you can start charging for a service. And that's what's going to be a little bit important, because that's what's new. Instead of having these bucket models or connectivity bucket models, you can actually start paying for the actual service, getting the film you want to see, or getting the transmission that you want to. Kind of like the logistics business where FedEx is nowadays they charge you for the insurance. They charge you for the value of the packages that are going to be delivered. So that being said, yes, the value chain, it will be changing, but we're still very much in the early days in that context. There's still a fragmented industry with a lot of players.
David, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think as was previously mentioned, I mean, the value chain will evolve as much as the technology evolves. I mean, one of the issues that we always look for, our customers are looking for a global product, and it's just very difficult to get one that meets all requirements everywhere, and you can just put it in a FedEx box and ship it. So I think the requirements change. I think we've got some technology, some regulatory issues to figure out, and also longer term, I think as more wider or broader solutions come to the market, that's obviously going to change the value chain because today, in many cases, it's a straight financial decision. This thing's going to save me money or it's going to make me money. I think in what we'll see is that M2M enabled applications become discretionary consumer purchases, which are not necessarily, people don't understand this M2M necessarily, but the value chain there has definitely changed.
Okay, yeah, good stuff. And to continue this value shift theme, let's talk about big data next. For example, API, we forecast that last year the analytics associated with M2M/IoT generated already around $2 billion in revenue. And this year we expect that that's going to increase by another 1 billion. Like, these are quite rough ballpark figures, kind of depend on the segmentation, but anyway, that's the range. So some of the leading analytic use cases that we have identified, there's obviously predictive maintenance, there's usage-based pricing, including insurance, and then also what I find quite interesting is this next generation product and service lifecycle management tools. So could each of you name one or two analytic use cases you are seeing gaining traction among your customers? Let's start from here.
Yeah, so we've been partnering with people like SAP for their HANA analytics platforms, where we're feeding them information from things like retail coolers, ice cream freezers, beer coolers, soda coolers, and they're feeding this into their event stream processor platform for real-time event alerting, for inventory management functions. When do I need to route a truck? Is that truck available? Is the inventory being depleted at a faster rate than normal? And what is the long-term inventory implications? So also things like predictive maintenance, very important when there's 30 million coolers and then freezers in the world, and you want to look for trends on how to better maintain those and how to optimize your maintenance schedules. And then you want an analytics platform like that. So those are the two main use cases: inventory management and predictive maintenance.
Okay. Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess our take on analytics is slightly different in the sense that we're not the end customer application in this sense. We're more of the managed service providers. But what's really driving for us, and what's really going to become important for us, is this notion of hybrid networks where it's not just cellular, where you're actually managing multiple connections for a customer, and you're actually looking at the trends in those connections from a usage, connectivity, availability, reliability, scalability perspective. So analytics becomes a tool that enables us to provide more information to our customers around how hybrid networks to solve M2M or IoT problems can be managed.
Okay, in my speech, I talked a little bit about customer care. That's actually one element of the analytics as such. And just to spin on a little bit maybe on what Charlie was saying of one of the industries that is going to be coming big in machine to machine, the retail industry. There you'll definitely have tons of examples on the analytics, both on the behavior of the consumer, behavior of the logistics chains, and so on. And it's very, combining a consumer and logistic is probably the holy grail of the whole retail business. How do you get the products to the place where they need to be and the time they need to be? And at the end of the day, that's really an analytics that is actually happening. And the most recent example that I've been reading, that I just read it in the morning, yesterday on the plane, it's a construction company. Construction companies today, in particular those that have rental of equipment, power tools and power equipment and so on, they basically have price lists and then they have rebates to their big customers. Those price lists and the rebates are going to disappear. They're going to be replaced by analytics. They come back, they go into historical data, they look at how has this customer been purchasing and renting from me, and also what kind of wear and tear and how has he been handling the tools, getting the information from the equipment that has been renting that can actually set the price. So instead of having price lists and rebates, you actually have the right price from the very beginning based on how your customer behaves.
So I'll pick one in the heavy equipment market. So one of our customers is currently working on a system. Basically, it will log data and it will look for preventative maintenance data. It sees something that's awry, maybe in an oil pump or something, or a piece of equipment on a piece of heavy equipment, part of the engine. The analytics there will say, we've seen this in 4 out of, or X number of units out of the manufacturing lot. So you can actually sit there and decide whether it needs to go back and look at and pull data or pull additional data from all the units that were produced that week, because those 4 units all happen to be produced that 1 week. And basically enable them to go out and pull the data from the field to see what's going on in the field before the customers even notice a problem. So in this case, the idea is to go and isolate the problem by getting real-time data from actual units, and potentially head off a larger issue as soon as that information is found. And typically before this system was deployed, they didn't really have that ability. They would have to be involved in running truck rolls, sending a technician out to go and find the piece of equipment, and then download the data, which is just not viable. So this system really gives a very short-circuit loop that if they think there's something going wrong, they can quickly pull data, and it's at very little cost relative to even just rolling one truck or one technician to go and chase a piece of heavy equipment somewhere.
Okay, excellent. And then I'd like to discuss a little bit about barriers to entry and IoT developers. Because as it happens, here in London there's a monthly occurring meetup. It's called IoT meetup, so it's a pretty casual event, like basically hosted by this one platform company, so Xifly. And it's lubricated by a lot of free booze, and it got this very diverse group of people. So it's got a lot of makers, hobbyists, and a lot of mobile application developers who kind of want to experiment with IoT. And but surprisingly many also like people from advertising and marketing. I've even met a couple of full-time artists there who would like to create, for example, art installations based on connected products. And every time I ask these people, like, so what's their perception about building cellular or satellite connectivity into this kind of visions? They say that it's probably devilishly complicated or prohibitively expensive. So I think, to me, there's a really big mismatch between this what we could call a developer community and then this supplier industry. So on one hand, you have a lot of potential creativity and kind of a lot of ideas, and on the other hand, you have a lot of valuable technology to actually help those people materialize their visions. But these two worlds really don't meet. So what are your thoughts? I mean, how could we as an industry somehow make this connectivity more accessible to, let's say, more casually engaged, more kind of experimental and speculative developers than it's today? Any takers?
So I think you're asking how do we make it easier for the ecosystem? I think Miguel said it best, that it's very fragmented today. So if you look at what Telit's doing with the acquisition of ILS technology and our DeviceWise application enablement platform is, we've got our one-stop shop model with Telit. We've got modules. We've got gateway partners that make out-of-the-box gateways you can bolt on a machine. We're selling connectivity. We're reselling connectivity from partners like Telefonica and AT&T and Verizon, and we're selling our application enablement platform, which has 80% out of the box of most of the machine layer abstraction up into the IT domain. So a developer can come in and very quickly leverage our open APIs or gateways that automatically deposit that information right from the machine, the bulldozer, the generator, the car, the truck, right into SAP. Or they can leverage open APIs out of our petabyte scale data store, so they can develop cool new web apps and mobile apps. So again, we've abstracted the machine layer into the IT domain so people can rapidly create applications. Where in the past they were knitting all this stuff together. They're developing protocol stacks. They were trying to figure out how to connect this stuff to the cellular network, negotiate contracts with the cellular operators, and ultimately stitch all this stuff together. But then they get to market, they'd find out, oh wait, I didn't solve the security problem as best as I thought I knew it. I didn't solve the scalability problem. This thing only reached 10,000 connections, and now it's not economically viable. So we're talking to tons and tons of these application service providers that built this stuff from the ground up, and now they're going to Gen 2, Gen 3, and they realize, wow, I really need a platform. Or the next 2 developers in a garage say, I want to get to market as fast as some of the big guys. So that's what we're doing. We're creating this out-of-the-box experience for anybody that wants to go quickly and leverage our economies of scale. We've invested millions, so you don't have to. So,
maybe I could just add a couple of things, because I think you have on two hands 2 different problems. One is, how do you make accessible this technology such that we do have an increasing group of people who want to take solutions to market? And maybe some of those solutions are driven by a consumer-led model, and maybe some of those applications are driven by an enterprise or a business-led model. And those drive different things in this whole thing. You know, maybe you're happy to develop on the web and just have an open platform with an open interface, and then maybe shared connectivity on the least cost provider is the right route to go. But what you're giving up in that is some of the value that this industry has not yet quantified in terms of quality of service, network availability, network reassurance, platform reassurance, device quality, and all of those things. Because the industry's kind of got stuck between both hands. So I think, you know, as part of the challenge going forward is, how do we quantify and value some of those services that customers would look for? So network critical applications that need a true round trip delay. Networks that have to provide a high level of availability when the network operator today is on best efforts. There are all of those challenges that come out. And maybe on one hand there is a fast route, cheaper route to market. On the other hand, there's a professional, business-driven route to market, and the two have to clash together.
Yeah. You almost said what I was going to say, so I need,
I
need to imagine something else. No, but I agree and I concur. I think there's also one element here, and I was touching on that on my speech as well. In this arena, devices can be aggressive towards networks. So there's, aside from addressing that space, you also need to address the space that how do you make the devices behave in a way that their networks are capable of handling the situations. And my take on that is you need to, and also on what you're saying, you need to go to the source. At the end of the day, where you're creating the chips and the chipsets and the silicon is where you need to start doing the references designs and start educating the community. So we have a very important role as an industry, from module and chipset providers and network providers, to start explaining those elements as well. Because developers will take that into their hearts if they know, okay, I need to think about this. So it's about explaining, this is what you need to think about, this is what you need to do. Publishing, it's a lot about publishing and making sure, and already as part of the reference designs, that you take the aspects of the network considerations and then the ease of use. And just going back to your question, it's always ease of use and simplicity which is going to be the winner. So you need to make it easy, you need to take away parameters and complexity, and you need to publish so that it becomes easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fragmentation has always been an issue, but I think also when we see people come to us, they've got 2 paths, and often, they've got like a fast prototyping. Hey, we're going to do a limited rollout on this platform just to make sure everything works, and then they come back and they kind of look, as was said before, they really kind of want to look at the core networks behind things. They want to look at the core device manufacturers and integrate that at a much higher level, a much more higher volume level. So I think there's benefits to both ways, and ultimately maybe what happens is, everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, but if you get to really high volume application, obviously there's some synergies, there's some benefits to specifically designing that product or a service around that versus trying to take something off the shelf, which works fine for a smaller volume or less specific application.
Okay, yeah, thank you, gentlemen. That was very insightful. And yeah, I can see that Ellen is serving the drinks.
Yes.
So I think we could have one really concise last one. Can you think of any emergent IoT verticals that are today very small or non-existent, but are going to be a really big deal in like 5 to 10 years' time? Like, I'm going to mention precision agriculture. I think that's going to be really transformative. Probably going to solve the food crisis on the planet. Something like that. Feel free to think big.
I think healthcare is up and coming. I mean, it hasn't taken off as fast as we'd like it to because of regulation. But I think wearable technologies is not about kids with radios in their jackets, but it's more about, the elderly population wearing monitoring devices so we can monitor our parents. I don't think our elderly are ever going to opt in for monitoring themselves. It's probably going to be me wanting to make sure my mom's okay and that she's safe when I can't keep an eye on her, right? So I think wearable technologies in the healthcare market, once we get past a lot of this regulation, it's going to take a while, but it's going to take off, I think, in a very, very big way.
I think your thoughts around maybe 5 to 10 years in the future, and if you take out some of the things that are in the hype and the press today, some areas that are going to become critical are around maybe perhaps water and irrigation, agriculture, farming, and how we continue to drive and build and create enough new things for our families. Optimization of how you get that efficiently from the field or the farm to the store, green, all of those things start to play a part, and the business case changes as you get further down into those niche areas. But I think, whether you look at it from a social perspective or a business perspective, socially, those things are key, I think.
I think my perspective is pretty much, I think the machine-to-machine and the consumer industries over time are going to be merging in one way or another. The difference will be if the device was actually designed for communication or or the device was designed for another purpose. So I think the consumer industry, regardless, is what's going to be one of the big drivers in a new type of a context. So it's and there I include the wearables and so on. So it's just an easy way of answering that everything that benefits a person is going to be big.
It actually go along with agriculture, just from recent experience. Last week I was on vacation with my family in California, and we were driving around through some of the orange groves on the way to Sequoia National Park, and signs up everywhere about fighting for water, and that whole area is dependent upon water being delivered to that area. And then there's a big fight between where the water falls in the mountains and where the water gets consumed in Los Angeles, or whether it gets consumed in the farms. So I think ultimately, there are already applications out there for managing moisture management. How much do you sprinkle? There are applications out there in towns that are nascent right now where they can help to control the amount of water that people sprinkle on their lawns, for example. But I think there's there's going to need to be regulations going to drive that, because there's a whole. It's amazing when I go to some places and people have planted grass and imported dirt and soil, and it's in the middle of the desert and they're growing grass. It seems so crazy that every morning they're pumping tens of hundreds of gallons of water that's going to evaporate a few hours later. So I think, with regulation, I think agriculture and moisture and water management is going to be a big one.
Okay, very good. Thanks to the panel for your time and thoughts, and to audience for your attention.